The calls are getting louder for police reform, both nationwide and right here in Spokane. And since this summer's protests, some city council members have actually been urging tighter controls on police actions, including use of the K-9 unit. But SPD warns if that happens, safety in the city could get worse, not better.
Up, up. Yeah, boy. Good boy. We come out, and usually a lot of times we start off our shift, we come out here and we'll exercise the dog.
While it may not look like it on the surface,
Cregan.
SPD officer Todd Belitz and his K-9 Zeus are hard at work.
You've talked about how this tennis ball teaches him this is more than just playtime.
Follow. Life. Absolutely. It's time for him to burn off energy and it's time for him to play. However, he doesn't realize it at times, but everything that we do out here is building on obedience. Cregan.
It is the cornerstone for their work together to find and apprehend criminals.
I'll let him run around. I'm not going to be super strict with him, but I'm going to force him to drop the ball when I want him to drop the ball. I'll work exercises of having him call off. Here, los. So commands to drop a ball is the same as to let go of a bite. Searching for a ball would be the same command as searching for a person.
In 5 years together, they've made hundreds of arrests, but now their job is coming under a harsh new spotlight. In the wake of local protests and calls all across the country to demilitarize police, Spokane City Council President Brienne Beggs proposed this resolution, urging a number of restrictions, including prohibiting intentional dog bites unless they are justified in using deadly force.
So if somebody doesn't have a weapon, but they're not following directions, they'll send the dog to bite them. And that's probably where I would draw the line. And the reason I draw the line is the dog will do too much damage to the person to justify what they're doing.
The proposal has been to only deploy the dog in a situation that would be comparable to you pulling your gun, life or death. What is your argument against that?
Well, if we're to make these dogs deadly force, the dogs wouldn't even come out of the car. Because to deploy deadly force would mean that I'm justified standing right in front of somebody and actually shooting them.
In that type of a scenario where the dog is looking for a suspect and you're not exactly sure where he is, might be dangerous, might be armed.
All right, well, you're gonna get bit if you don't comply.
How would you do that without the dog?
So the other option for us to search a neighborhood is just police officers walking around and just shining a light at 3 in the morning in every hidey hole they can think of. Now the potential for an ambush is skyrocketing with every hole that they search.
Spokane Police K-9!
It's an almost nightly occurrence for the K-9 teams, getting called out on everything from burglary suspects on the loose to full-blown SWAT standoffs with known violent offenders. But Belitz tells me while deployments are frequent, dog bites themselves are much more rare.
I think there's some misconception that we bite hundreds of people a year.
In all of 2018, SPD reported 1,042 K-9 deployments. That's where the dog was sent out to locate or help apprehend a suspect. Of those, 262 suspects were actually caught, and 27 resulted in some kind of dog bite, which is about 10%. In 2019, the numbers for deployments and captures both went up, while actual dog bites went slightly down to 9%. And in the first 10 months of 2020, captures have gone up significantly, while dog bites are down to just 2% of the time. Belitz says it's proof the dogs are actually one of the best de-escalation tools they have.
Good boy. If somebody's afraid of Zeus because he's big and he's loud and he's got teeth, and they choose to comply and surrender with nobody getting hurt, that's a win. That's a win for everybody.
But Council President Begg says that's not always how it happens. He points to the 2019 incident where SPD K-9 officer Dan Lesser sent his dog into a closed vehicle.
Get your dog!
Body cam footage shows a man with multiple outstanding warrants saying he was ready to surrender. At the time, Lucas Ellerman was wanted for felony possession of a firearm, although no gun was ever found in the car. Police Chief Craig Meidel later voiced his support for the K-9 deployment to get a potentially armed suspect out of the car. Lesser, though, later resigned from the K-9 unit and was disciplined for policy violations. But an SPD internal investigation found he did not violate the department's use of force policy.
And the reason I got into this is because the department said the officer did everything right. he followed his policy and training. And so my statement has been, if he followed his policy and training, then there's something wrong with that policy and training.
Every K-9 deployment is obviously covered under a policy.
SPD has made changes since then. In July, a new sergeant took over the K-9 unit. I'm told, though, it was not because of the lesser investigation.
And he's been reporting to our public safety committee meetings once a month with how many dog encounters and how many bites, and they really have gone down. So I think they have already started to implement processes that are less damaging to people.
Beggs also says he worries about the dogs biting innocent bystanders. In the last 3 years, though, SPD tells me there were no accidental bites or unintentional injuries caused by the dogs, though there were 2 complaints paid out in 2018, both filed by the same person who was arrested in 2014 and again in 2015. Those cases were both closed in 2018 with a total payout of just over $12,000.
No, here.
Belitz admits dog bites can cause injury, but he insists the real damage comes when suspects refuse to follow orders.
And they turn and they surrender. We have the ability to recall that dog. And now again, we've de-escalated that from even from a dog bite, which was going to happen, to absolutely no force necessary. Zeus, here! Good boy. So if they get bit at the end of that location, if the dog tracks and searches and finds them, that's on them because they've been given ample opportunity to surrender.
And he says the safety these dogs bring to the entire community is the real benefit.
If we take these dogs away, somebody's going to be hurt. He keeps us safe, we keep him safe, and then together we keep everybody else safe. Every single time the suspect dictates where they're in that. Case law mandates that.
Now, it's also really important to note that these conversations about reform are still ongoing. We know the negotiations between SPD, city leaders, the NAACP are all still underway, and they're tackling other issues beyond just the K-9 unit. It is going slower than any of them would like, and that's because of this coronavirus pandemic, but they all agree by coming together and having these tough conversations, they know eventually they'll be able to reach that middle ground and make some real change.